Assalamu alaikum, this is Dr. Mona Al-Idrisi, author of the Muslim Narcissist book and empowerment coach for Muslims. In today's podcast, I will be addressing a very important issue, which is the increase in corruption in both the dawah and religious education industry. Now, it's been a long time coming for this one. I've been gearing myself up to record it, but in light of recent events and the allegations of child abuse that have been linked to a Quran teacher, I thought that this would be the best time to release this podcast and educate people about this level of corruption in this religious field of work. And when I say corruption, I mean hypocrisy. Okay, it's not the first case we've seen, and it certainly won't be the last. There have been many scandals involving people who are in dawah, they teach Quran and hadith, they are professors in universities who teach Islamic studies and so on. There have been many scandals, and I will explain how people fall into these scandals when they're meant to be people of knowledge, right? They're meant to be people who fear Allah. They're meant to be people of the Quran, and they're meant to be the role models in society because they are teaching Quran verses, they're teaching the hadith. So when they display hypocrisy, it causes a crisis in society on different levels. And I'll go into them, inshallah, in this podcast. Now, just before I jump in, I'd like to kindly ask you to like the podcast if you find it helpful. Do share it with those whom you feel could benefit from this information. And do subscribe to the channel and sign up to the newsletter if you would like to be notified about podcast releases, news about courses and other things. And do grab a copy of the book, The Muslim Narcissist, if you haven't already. It's available in Amazon and other stores, and you'll learn so much about yourself and other people in it. And if you need one-to-one counselling and coaching, just click on the link below in the description box. It will take you to the website where you can read all the information about the programs I offer, the fees and so on. Or you can email me directly. My email address is below in the description box too. Okay, so let's jump in. And the first thing I would like to address is the issue that many Muslims have in our communities, which is putting people in the religious field on a pedestal they don't deserve to be on, and they shouldn't be on. So Muslims are struggling to know who to follow or take Islamic guidance and advice from because of how confusing it's all become now. And many people are looked upon as sheikhs and sheikhas when they're not. Okay, they don't deserve that title because they haven't done the work to become a scholar. So a sheikh or a sheikha is a female or male scholar. And unfortunately, so many preachers are being looked upon as scholars when they're not. Many of them are highly uneducated, or they take their information from corrupt sources and they pass it on to other people, which corrupts the minds and the knowledge of those who look up to them. And because they have a big following on social media and they are given a platform to speak all over the world, they gain celebrity status and people start to look at them as sheikhs and sheikhas when they're not. Okay, these are just people who are passing on knowledge, whether it's correct or incorrect, to their audience, and people like them because they're young, because they're modern, because, they can relate to people and so on, but it doesn't mean that they're scholars. I can't say this enough, because I'm noticing on so many online platforms, people are calling loads of regular preachers sheikh. Or sheikha, can you please answer this question for me? Sheikh, can you give me a fatwa? He's not qualified to give you a fatwa. Why are you asking a da'wah bro for a fatwa? Why are you asking them for Islamic advice when they're not qualified to give it to you? Okay, a lot of Muslims are falling into this. They're getting terrible advice and they're ruining their own lives because they're not turning to the right people. And many of the people whom they turn to cherry pick so much from Islam that suits, for example, a red pill mindset. Okay, so they prefer to follow preachers who are quite misogynistic and red pill in their thinking because that version of Islam or that understanding of Islam suits them. So they get all their Islamic advice from people who combine a red pill mindset with Quran verses and ahadith, and many of these ahadith are taken out of context, and so are the Quran verses. So people are misguided. Okay? And you have to remember also that famous preachers online usually have a big marketing team behind them. Okay, this is not solo work. There are people who are advertising for them, pushing out their content, writing content for them, and managing all of their work. Okay, you think that all of these big preachers who, give lectures all over the world are doing this on their own? No, they have management teams. And the management teams tell them what they can and can't say, what they can and can't do. They are puppets to their management teams. And that's why many of them won't talk about Palestine and other global issues that involve politics or that involve taboo subjects. Their management teams don't allow them. The management teams are the ones who fund them. So these are preachers who get a lot of funding as well. And if they don't comply with the rules, they'll get cancelled. It's that simple, right? All their contracts will get cancelled. So because they are loved by people, right? They're social media worthy, because they're young and good looking and they know how to engage with people, because they have these qualities, they are funded and they are put on a pedestal and given celebrity status. And this is dangerous not only for the people, but for them too. And I'll explain more about that later. Now, as for those who are popular online, but they don't have management teams or marketing campaigns behind them, they will get their fame by excessively posting online and using their good looks and charm to reel people in. And they basically regurgitate information and knowledge that they have taken from other people so they can look like people of knowledge. Okay? The word regurgitate means to repeat information without analysing or actually comprehending it. So you are giving knowledge that you don't fully understand or believe in. You can't believe in something you don't fully understand, and that's why so many of these people fall into scandals and they get caught out doing things they're not meant to be doing. So they either can't comprehend the consequences of their actions or the dangers of what they're doing, or they're hypocrites full stop. They're either stupid or they're hypocrites. Now, as we know, all humans make mistakes as well. Okay, everyone has the ability to fall into mistakes and repent from them. That's how we're designed. Okay, we're designed to make mistakes and do silly things. So we learn. However, when you are volunteering yourself to work in the religious field, then you have to be 10 times more careful with the responsibility you now carry because you've chosen to carry it. Because teaching Islam, but not practicing what you preach, is going to land you in very hot water in this life and the next. Because people are looking up to you for knowledge. People are looking up to you as a role model, and you've got to be careful. You've got to hold yourself accountable at all times and hold yourself to a very high moral standard. And have people around you who hold you accountable for everything. And you can only do that if you're surrounded by empaths. If you're surrounded by Muslim narcissists, they're always going to encourage you to do the wrong thing, and they will cover up your sins, and they will feed your ego with those sins. And it's usually because they are committing the same sins themselves. In this industry, a lot of people cover up for each other because there are many narcissists within it. And I'll explain why later. And it's important for people to know the difference between falling into a mistake and deliberately committing a sin knowing that it's haram. Okay? If someone in the religious field falls into a sin, unintentionally, Allah will cover up that sin. Because Allah knows that, like I said, the human being is fallible. The shaitan will attack all of us at some point. And we will fall into the temptation of the qareen, the soldier of Iblis. But those people who are empathic are quick to rectify those mistakes. They repent, they stop what they're doing, and they continue as normal. However, those who are hypocrites and they know that what they're doing is wrong and they're giving a different impression of themselves in public to who they are in private, those are the people who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will expose publicly and they will be humiliated. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not take it lightly when people play with Islam. You can't play with the deen and expect to get away with it. A lot of these people believe that they can get away with it because they look so pious. They look super religious. No one would suspect that they would be pedophiles, rapists, or men who groom vulnerable women for sex. There are plenty of people like this in the religious field. And a lot of people are not awake to this. And these people can destroy lives. So this podcast, inshallah, will create an awareness about the dangers of putting these people on a pedestal. Okay, this whole celebrity culture of putting religious people on a pedestal is dangerous. And it has to be stopped. Because these people are only using you to boost their ego. And you'll notice that the dawah, or the religious teaching, or the Quran lessons that they give, become more about themselves than the actual knowledge they give. So if you're teaching Quran, why do you have to have videos of yourself doing ridiculous things? Why do you have to have videos of yourself looking into a mirror or, in full makeup, or you're in the gym showing off your biceps and triceps and whatnot, and you're showing off the car that you're driving with the great leather interior? And why are you doing all of that and posting Quran quotes and hadith quotes if it's truly about the knowledge? I don't trust any accounts that deem to be religious and they are promoting how they look all the time for validation and compliments and DMs, and they're reeling people in to be obsessed about them as people. When someone's account is more about them than the knowledge, this person is not sincere in their heart with the knowledge they're giving. They want the validation and compliments from people. I've seen women post Quran quotes over a video of themselves, getting ready and putting lipstick on. I'm just thinking, what on earth is going on with our people? Or she's posted a Quran quote and she's in a full niqab, but she's got meter-long eyelashes and loads of eye makeup on and, long red nails, and it doesn't look right. And of course, there are lots of videos and reels and posts by dawah bros who sit there in a vest. He's half naked, sitting there giving a lecture to men about their rights and marriage and polygamy and stories of the Sahaba. Good Lord, the Sahaba would have castrated the lot of them if they were to see today what's being done and said in the name of Islam. Okay, how it's being commercialized and being used to make people famous. So even if they don't post the Quran verse or the hadith over a problematic video or a picture, they will post their pictures in between, right? In between these quotes and verses and teachings, just to remind people of how hot they are. Look how beautiful I am. Look how handsome I am. You need constant reminders of that. So I'm going to give you lots of videos and lots of posts where I show you how attractive I am. And yes, you can compliment me and validate me all day long. And all you sisters can tell me endlessly how lucky my future wife is going to be because I have the best of both worlds. I'm so handsome and I'm so pious. Yes, keep saying things like that. Keep saying things like that because it's boosting my ego. It's making me feel good about myself. Keep telling me how I'm the whole package. Keep telling me how I'm a dream man because I'm so religious and I get up for tahajjud, because I tell you all I get up for tahajjud every day, and I tell you all that I'm going for umrah, and I will show you the entire process because I have taken a selfie video from the start of umrah till the end of umrah. So you've basically done umrah with me because I want this validation so badly that instead of focusing on my worship and my salah, I've actually taken an entire video of myself doing the entire tawaf and the entire sa'i. So I can be a mashallah brother. What a pious brother. You're so inspirational, brother. And he's being knocked about by everyone who's shoving him out the way because they're frustrated that he's on his phone recording for you guys. And this is something influencers do in general, whether they're male or female. They will go for Umrah and film the entire thing, even them reading their dua, reading Quran, reading their takbirat, and sobbing their hearts out in front of the Kaaba, right? They've set up their camera to film themselves sobbing, and then they switch it off. The whole thing is just weird, and I hate seeing it. And honestly, if I didn't have to have social media for my work, I wouldn't be on it at all, because of how nauseated I am at looking at Muslim accounts. And you also get those preachers who will film those cringe videos in the middle of the night. It's dark, and they're like, guys, I've just woken up for tahajjud prayer. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, and I just wanted to remind you, fi sabilillah, that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said this. Yaqi, you don't need to film all of your worship rituals to teach people about how to pray and how to do Umrah and how to get up for tahajjud. People are fully aware of how to do it. But, they love fooling people into believing that they are very pious. So don't fall into that and, hail these people as being role models. Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu narrated that the Prophet ﷺ said, لا تطروني كما أطرت النصارى ابن مريم فإنما أنا عبده فقولوا عبد الله ورسوله. Do not exaggerate my status as the Christians did with the son of Mary. Verily, I am only a servant, so refer to me as the servant of Allah and His Messenger. So the Prophet ﷺ, he used to despise people putting him on a pedestal. He did not like fame, and he didn't like the attention. He was always at home with his family when he wasn't required to be out in society, tending to the needs of the people or being out on the battlefield. The scholar Bishr ibn al-Harith rahimahullah said, لا يجد حلاوة الآخرة رجل يحب أن يعرفه الناس. A man will not find the sweetness of the hereafter if he loves to be known by the people, which means he seeks fame and loves fame. Okay, his goal is to be famous in whatever he pursues. And Ka'b ibn Malik radiallahu anhu narrated that the Prophet ﷺ said, ما ذئبان جائعان أرسلا في غنم بأفسد لها من حرص المرء على المال والشرف لدينه. 2 hungry wolves roaming freely among a flock of sheep are less destructive to them than the greed of a man for wealth and high status are to his religion. Okay, so the Prophet ﷺ is saying here that the greed for wealth and high status and fame are very destructive to your akhirah. If you seek those in anything you do, especially in the religious field, you are destroying your akhirah with your own hands. So there are 4 types of people who enter the religious field. The first type are those who fail in college and don't have enough grades to get into a good university to study law, engineering, biology, medicine, and so on. Okay, so this applies to students in Saudi Arabia. So if you fail in school, you have to go and study Islam. So unfortunately, Islamic studies are seen to be undesirable for the majority of people because they want high-paid jobs. So if you were to graduate from an Islamic college or university, you'll get a low-paid job as a Quran teacher, a school teacher, or you could just be put in the religious police force. And these were groups of men who would patrol the streets, cafes, restaurants, venues. They would patrol everyone and every place to check that people are abiding by Sharia law. And they were harsh, they were oppressive, they were rude, and they loved to terrorize people. When Mohammed bin Salman came into power, he abolished the services of the religious police, so they're not seen in public anymore. And this was mainly for business reasons, because he wanted to open the doors to tourism in the country, and he knew that the religious police would put off so many tourists and give them a bad experience. So It was known that if you were to graduate from an Islamic college, that's the kind of job you will have. So people aspired to be doctors, lawyers, and engineers and professors because it gave them a brighter future in their eyes, right? Because they made Islamic studies look so unappealing. Now, as I've said in previous podcasts, this never used to be the case. In the Islamic Golden Age, the most intelligent children and young adults were enrolled in Islamic studies because the leaders knew that intelligent judges were needed, intelligent muftis were needed. So only the brightest were selected to study Islam and fiqh and hadith so that they could become the future scholars, right? They picked those who were able to think outside the box, those who had emotional intelligence, those who were exceptionally bright. And now the tables have turned and it's the least bright children who go into Islamic studies. Now, the danger of this is that so many young adults go into Islamic colleges there and they study Islam by force because they need a job at the end of it. They need a salary. So they don't care if they have to graduate and be a Quran teacher or a member of the religious police force. As long as there was a job at the end of it with a salary, then they'll do what they have to do. And many of the students who went to Islamic college were Bedouin students, they were tribal students, and they had an incredible ability to memorize the Quran. Okay, so many of them graduated as huffaz, and memorizing the whole Quran would help them get jobs as imams and preachers and sometimes muftis and judges if they had the right connections. But it didn't mean that their hearts were connected to the Quran. They just had an incredible ability to memorize. And the Bedouins, since the time of the Prophet ﷺ, were known for their incredible memorization skills because they were the poets. Okay, they were the ones who always wrote the poetry and memorized it all. So it's something genetic. And then many of these young men, especially the men, became scholars in the kingdom and they became preachers. And that's where you see the hatred come out in their preaching. They're harsh, misogynistic. You don't see any spirituality in them. They lack a lot of empathy. They're rude to women. They don't know how to answer questions properly. They were hated by so many Saudi people and people in the Khalij in general because their fatwas and teachings made people's lives very difficult because of their understanding of Islam. These are people who weren't even religious to begin with. They were forced into Islamic college because they were failures, and they carry that shame. They carry that insecurity of not being as clever as their brothers who became doctors, lawyers, engineers, and they got to travel abroad and study in foreign universities, and they got to see a different life, and they were stuck with all these staunch Salafis, and religion was forced on them. So you can see the resentment come out in their teaching. They don't smile. These are the people narcs love to listen to. Okay? Because the narcissist can resonate with these preachers. They love the harsh understanding of Islam. They love to abuse and torture people with a very harsh and staunch understanding of it. So a lot of people who call themselves Ahl al-Salaf aren't truly Ahl al-Salaf. There are narcissistic Ahl al-Salaf who have taken the route of the Khawarij. And the Khawarij were those who were extremists, and the Prophet ﷺ used to despise them. Okay? He used to despise the Khawarij. So when I mention Salafis in my podcast, I don't mean all Salafis. You have the empathic Salafis who really follow the way of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba and Al-Khulafa al-Rashidin. And then you have the narcissistic, staunch Salafis. These are the problematic ones. These are the ones who narcissists love to listen to. And they will create fatwas that make women's life in general very difficult. So this pushed a lot of Arabs out of Islam. So many Arabs, so many Saudis became atheists because of the narcissistic Salafi preachers, and because of the religious police, and because of the harsh teachings about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that were forced on children in schools. Remember, these became our Quran teachers and our Islamic studies teachers in schools. Children were only taught that Allah was tyrannical, that you get thrown in hell for everything, that you get punished for everything. They are speaking from their own resentment because they're not religious anyway. They don't have a love for Allah anyway. So what they're going to teach is, the tyrannical side of things. They're going to teach children that Allah is a tyrant and He's not a forgiving God. Any mistake you make, you could get thrown in hell for it. This is what's happened when people were forced into studying Islam. And you can apply this to children who are forced to go to the mosque, beaten if they didn't learn their Quran verses or do their Islamic studies homework. All of this resentment builds up and it causes them to teach Islam in a way that drives people out of it rather than bring them into it. And the shaitan clings onto these people because they look like Muslims and they say the Shahada and they talk about the Prophet ﷺ so much. But what they're teaching is satanic. What they're teaching is against Islam. It's against the mercy of Islam. They're teaching that Islam is a difficult religion to follow. Anyone who belongs to a staunch Salafi cult will understand and see how difficult it is to follow that particular way of life because of their corrupted understanding of Islam. So many Saudi women left Islam because the staunch Salafi preachers kept teaching men how to beat their wives, how to discipline their wives, how to enslave their wives. Your wife cannot leave the house. It's haram for her to see the marketplace. It's haram for her to be in the shops. It's haram for her to get on a plane and see her family. It's haram, it's haram, it's haram. People got sick of it. They're like, what's this religion? We don't want to be a part of it anymore. Look how the Christians live. Look how the Europeans live. We want to live like them. And that's why Saudi became secular very quickly. You see all these changes happening in Saudi. It's not because the government is so mighty and powerful. It's the people. The people have rebelled against the staunch Salafi regime that was present before Mohammed bin Salman came along into power. So the change of Saudi escalated quickly because of the people and their desperate need for change, their desperate need to be out of the clutches of these vile people who made religion so ugly for so many people and so many children. This is a satanic mission of Iblis to corrupt Islam in the eyes of people. So it's his system that the people who don't actually want to study Islam became the ones who graduated from Islamic college. This was his master plan because he knows that people who do not hold a love for Allah in their hearts and a love for the Quran and Islam, if they don't hold a love for that, they're not going to teach it properly. They're going to teach it in a corrupt way, and they're going to teach it from resentment and hatred and insecurity and an inferiority complex. There are so many traumas and issues that stem from this. And remember also that back in those days, if you did not memorize the Quran properly and you didn't do your homework and all of that, you were beaten by your Quran teachers. They used to get the stick out on you. Okay, that whip would come out and the parents would allow them to discipline you in any way they see fit. Okay, and this is why so many children, even in the West, they used to hate going to Quran classes and to the mosque because they were taught by Muslims who came from uneducated communities and villages from back home. So they would be put into the mosques to teach the children Quran, and they were beaten and hit and abused. And that's why so many people grew up not wanting anything to do with Islam. So this again built resentment. And this would happen in university as well, especially with the boys. They would get punished if they did not memorize properly and they didn't do their homework properly. They were humiliated, they were called stupid, they were called all sorts of things. Okay? You can also apply this to, Muslims in the West as well who only studied Islam to please their parents. Right? They knew it would make their parents happy and proud, and it would give them something to brag about in the community. So their hearts weren't in it, but they did it just for status, just for their parents, just for validation, right? But the way they live their lives, especially in secret, is against Islamic principles. So they'll be addicted to things, they'll have girlfriends, they'll be smoking drugs and all sorts. Now, the second type of person who enters the religious field is the narcissist or psychopath who wants power. Okay, so these people could be academics who want to reach the level of scholars, or prominent judges. So when they work in the high court, they will get very big cases, and they love the control they will have over people's affairs. So they enjoy that feeling of power, knowing that people look up to them in desperation for a good outcome. Their fate lies in the hands of the judge. So narcissists and psychopaths will aspire to have these positions because it makes them feel powerful and it makes them feel important, and it's their way of controlling everyone they want to control. Remember, they have this obsession with controlling and abusing and all of that. So being a judge is a prime career choice for them. They love it. And I've come across many judges and stories of judges who work in the high courts and they receive millions in bribes because they're dealing with prominent cases, especially with royalty and the elite. So it's a great place to be for them to earn so much money, lawfully and unlawfully. Remember, narcissists and psychopaths don't have a fear of Allah, so they will do whatever it takes to become rich, powerful, and feared. Okay, so being a judge is a great career choice because almost everyone will shake in their boots standing in front of a judge, whether you're innocent or not. And I did mention before in previous podcasts that in the Islamic Golden Age, people were chosen by public vote to be muftis and judges. Okay, so you couldn't volunteer yourself for a position like this, and the wisdom behind it is to prevent narcissists and psychopaths from applying for these roles and, causing corruption in the community and the ummah in general. So you could never apply for these roles if you did not have the right character for them. But now, like I said, times have changed and people can volunteer themselves for these roles and these careers. If they study for them, they can have these jobs. And the majority of people who go for these jobs are narcissists and psychopaths. And this is why the justice system in, I would say, all Islamic countries is poor. It's very poor at the moment because of this problem. There's a lot of oppression happening in the courts where the innocent are thrown in jail. The innocent don't get their rights and the oppressors take their rights because of the bribes they're giving to the judges, or because the judge sniffs that someone is an empath, so he's decided that, nope, I'm not going to give him his rights, I don't like him, his light is blinding me, I'm going to side with the predator, the villain. And these are people who are known to make decisions based on their moods as well. So if he comes into work in a bad mood, he will corrupt the entire court case because he's just not in the mood for anyone that day. And in the Islamic Golden Age, leaders were held accountable by the judges. And that's why it was such a big responsibility to carry when you were chosen by your community to be the judge, because you had to hold people in power accountable. And it took someone brave to do that. Right now, everyone's a coward. There's no one who holds any Muslim leaders accountable for anything. The cowardice in our ummah runs very deep. There's no mufti, there's no judge, there's no scholar who is willing to hold any of them accountable for any of their mistakes, and they will always make mistakes. leaders are humans. And this is why in Islam we have a justice system so that everyone is held accountable from the servant to the king. So these positions, right, the positions of scholars, muftis and judges are sought after by narcissists and psychopaths who are craving power. Even a mufti who is narcissistic will issue fatwas to make people's lives difficult. They will issue fatwas to make the lives of women an absolute hell. And this is why we have such conflicts in fiqh. Because there's a battle right now between the fatwas of the staunch Salafis and the fatwas of modern day scholars who are trying to find a more balanced approach to fiqh because of the generational changes, right? We're not living in 7th century Arabia anymore or 18th century Arabia. A lot of fiqh will change as a result of societies changing, right? There's a new generation and they think differently and they live differently to how people used to live. So fiqh needs to be adapted in an authentic way so that people can implement Islam easily into their lives. Staunch Salafis don't believe in this. They believe that what was applied in 7th century Arabia has to be applied in the 21st century, and it's not always possible. And for this reason, new scholars are rejected by the staunch Salafis who will only listen to the prominent scholars who are now very elderly or have passed away, and they do not understand or did not understand the social issues of the new generation. So the psychopaths and narcissists who want to be scholars will usually teach the harsh interpretation of Islam because a lot of control and power comes with it. Makhlad ibn al-Hussein, rahimahullah, was a senior official in the Abbasid Caliphate, al-Khilafah al-Abbasiyah. He said, ما ندب الله العباد إلى شيء إلا اعترض فيه إبليس بأمرين ما يبالي بأيهما ظفر إما غلوا فيه وإما تقصيرا عنه. Allah never recommends something to his servants, but that Satan interferes with it in one of two ways. Satan does not care which of them succeeds. Either he makes them exaggerate in it, or he makes them belittle it. So in other words, Iblis is pleased with either extremism or leniency. So people can either be too strict with Islam, or they can be too liberal with it. Either way, it causes corruption in society and the ummah as a whole. So you will get some narcissists and psychopaths who will want to have power in society from a religious aspect because they want to spread liberalism rather than the harsh interpretation. So you get many of those people as well who've come in to our societies and to the ummah, and they have spread corrupt ideas about Islam from a very liberal perspective, and it's misguided a lot of people. For example, those people who have come in to say that hijab is not an obligation, that women can take it off and all of that. This is just an example. But these liberals have gained a lot of followers because they have made life a lot easier, but they have done so by removing the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So essentially the people who follow them are committing shirk. But they're very confused because these people who claim to be scholars and claim to be people of knowledge are justifying their teachings by, again, cherry-picking what they want from the Quran and Sunnah. So for example, when it comes to the hijab ruling, they will say things like the hijab was only meant for the wives of the Prophet ﷺ and not for all women. But this goes against the teachings of the prominent scholars who all agreed that hijab is an obligation for every Muslim woman. And this is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala requested that women take the wives of the Prophet ﷺ as role models. And hijab is also an obligation so that women can be identified as Muslim believers in public. Now, the third type of person who enters the religious field is the person who wants to become a somebody. Okay, they believe that if they show themselves to be a very pious, wonderful, religious person, then they will be loved, desired, and admired. So they're not evil people. They're not psychopaths. They're not forced into it. They go into it by choice because they believe they will get a lot of attention and validation from it. So these are usually the man children and the women children. They're very immature and they revel in all the praise, all the compliments, and the pedestal that people put them on. And these man children are the dawah bros. Okay, the ones who are trending, the ones who appear to be, very charming and good looking and all of that. They're very appealing to young men and young women. So they use their looks, they use their gym lifestyle, they will use, their personalities and red pill attitudes to get a big following. And you'll find also a group of women children who are narcissistic and toxic codependent, who will have their own platforms and they will preach, and you'll find that a lot of their mindsets are red pill too, because they are appealing to the same audiences as the man children. So if these man children and women children are staunch Salafi, and again they're just regurgitating information and knowledge, that's very common knowledge, right? They are giving information about salah and hijab and marriage and polygamy and all of that. It's knowledge everyone knows about, but they are repeating the same thing over and over and over again because they have no wisdom. They're just creating platforms for themselves with information that's already known. They're not bringing anything new. So what makes them appealing is that they discuss modern day social issues. And that's how their platforms grow. They don't grow because of the Islamic knowledge they have. They just inject Islamic knowledge with whatever it is they are talking about. But you'll notice that they don't have any wisdom. And it's torture watching their debates because they're highly immature. And because of their lack of knowledge in Islamic matters, they don't know how to argue or debate things properly. So their accounts become more about them than their knowledge. And that's why dawah bros and dawah sisters constantly post themselves on their pages. There are constant videos of them, constant photos of them, because the work is more about them than what they're actually giving, because what they're giving is not of high value. And when they constantly post themselves, right, they're posting their videos and pictures all the time, they're creating a fitna for themselves. And that's why they get targeted by loads of men or loads of women, and then they complain about it. They complain about the audacity of all these brothers who keep messaging them, or all these sisters who keep flooding their DMs. Oh, do me a favour. I'm going to come back onto this shortly in the podcast so that I don't go off on a tangent right now because I don't want to lose my train of thought. But yeah, that's the third type of person who would enter the religious field. And the last type are those who have a genuine passion and love for Islam. So these are the people who really do want to learn. They really do want to contribute to their society and to the ummah. They really want to learn and become, scholars and researchers, and they want to teach Quran and they want to be of service to their community. So they study Islam so that they can have a career in the religious field and help other people. They believe this is their divine calling and a way for them to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So as you can see, the people who are genuine in this field are the minority. The majority of people have hidden agendas when entering the religious field. It's only one category of people who enter the religious field with pure and good intentions. Okay, the majority of people will not. I've listed all the different types of people who work in dawah, who work in religious education, and you'll see that the majority of them are covert narcissists, or they're overt narcissists and they work in high courts and so on. It is very rare to come across a highly empathic judge in the Muslim world. But it is very common to come across many covert narcissists who have a lot of Islamic knowledge. And not just any Islamic knowledge, sometimes very impressive Islamic knowledge, because they're researchers. They've really dived deep into, for example, the cosmos, or science of the Quran, or the mathematical miracles of the Quran, and even stories of the prophets and the Sahaba. They go into them in very deep ways, and you become very impressed with their level of intelligence, and you like them. You like these people, you like listening to them. So it's heartbreaking, it's shocking, and it's very disappointing when a scandal comes out about them after they have preached to everyone to not do what they've been caught doing. It causes a crisis for a lot of people and a lot of confusion. And it's no coincidence that psychopaths are among the smartest people you'll ever meet, whether that's in the Islamic field or in general, right, in medicine, in law, in mathematics, and so on. Many of them have a genius mind, right? They're world champions at chess. They're world champions in things that mind boggle you. And there's a reason for that. I'll do another podcast about the mind of the psychopath, inshallah, later. But you'll find so many of them have so much knowledge, but they use it in evil ways. So their intention is not good, and it confuses people when scandals come out. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu reported that the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said, يخرج في آخر الزمان رجال يختلون الدنيا بالدين يلبسون للناس جلود الضأن من اللين ألسنتهم أحلى من السكر وقلوبهم قلوب الذئاب. Men will appear near the end of time who seek the worldly life with religion, confusing the people. Their skin is as soft as sheep, their words are sweeter than sugar, yet their hearts are like the hearts of wolves. So it's important to define who is considered to be a Muslim scholar. The most prominent Muslim female scholar was Aisha radiallahu anha, the wife of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. She was a poet and a medical expert too, and she devoted her life to teaching men and women about the life of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and many of the authentic ahadith came from her. So she was essentially the one who contributed the most to the spread of the message of the Prophet ﷺ by teaching people about him for 44 years after his death. And this knowledge got passed on through generations. So subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not give her children because he wanted her to focus on this mission. And men would come from everywhere to listen to her. They would sit behind a screen and she would teach everyone, so they couldn't see her, but she was able to educate them as well and help them with the knowledge they needed to become better as men and as Muslim believers. And one of the main things she would teach them was how the Prophet ﷺ was as a father and as a husband, so that he would always remain as a role model for them even after his death. And of course, the two most prominent and most important scholars who collected the authentic ahadith were Imam Muhammad al-Bukhari and Muslim ibn al-Hajjaj. So al-Bukhari compiled the first collection of ahadith, and it took him many years to do so because he had to authenticate the chains of narration. And the second collection of authentic ahadith was compiled by Muslim, who lived a couple of centuries after the Prophet ﷺ's death, and he also worked for many years to collect the ahadith and also had to authenticate the chains of narration. So the word sahih in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim means authentic. So essentially what we learn from this is that a scholar is a researcher. So someone can be a scholar in any field of study: science, physics, biology, engineering, and so on. So if they have brought new knowledge or new research to the subject, they become a scholar. A scholar is not someone who just repeats what other people have said before. They spend many years researching a subject until they become an expert in that particular field. Now, this becomes more complex when you enter the Islamic field of study because you have to do what Imam al-Bukhari did and what Muslim al-Hajjaj did to authenticate the Islamic knowledge they gave to other people. So you cannot present new Islamic knowledge without authenticating it first. And what's special about this is that if you authenticate new Islamic knowledge, you become a successor of prophets. So Abu Darda radiallahu anhu reported that the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said, العلماء خلفاء الأنبياء إن الأنبياء لم يورثوا دينارا ولا درهما إنما ورثوا العلم. The scholars are the successors of the prophets. Verily, the prophets do not pass on gold and silver coins in inheritance, but rather they only impart authentic knowledge. And as a result of this, Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu reported that the Prophet ﷺ said, العلماء أمناء الله على خلقه. The scholars are the trustees of Allah over His creation, which means scholars hold a huge responsibility over the people because it is their job to provide authentic knowledge. Because corrupt and incorrect Islamic knowledge comes from Iblis. And he sends his troops out, his shayateen al-ins, to teach the wrong understanding of Islam, to drive people out of it, and to corrupt the minds of people. And the shayateen al-ins, the devils in human form, are those who are slaves to their qareens, who are soldiers of Iblis. Okay, so they obey what these qareens say, and they present a very distorted and twisted understanding of Islam that doesn't have any love or any mercy or any wisdom or any compassion. It's very harsh, it's very strict, and it's not appealing for people. When people listen to it, they wouldn't want to convert, and it drives people out of the deen, or it makes people give up hope that they could ever be good Muslims. Okay, this type of knowledge comes from Iblis. So a true scholar's responsibility is to call people to Islam in a beautiful way and to patiently teach it to people and act upon the knowledge they give. So they can't be hypocrites. They have to practice what they preach. And due to the fitna of this dunya, you'll find that the true scholars are often isolated people. They're not very social people, they're very introverted, and they prefer to be away from society so that they can devote their lives and their energy to their research and teaching Islam to others. So for example, Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah was one of those scholars. He led a very simple life, and most of it was dedicated to learning, writing and teaching. He didn't even get married because all his time was occupied with this divine mission. And there are also reports to say that Imam Muhammad al-Bukhari didn't get married either because of how much time he had to invest in researching the authentic chains of narration. So the prominent scholars all agreed that for someone to be known or identified as a scholar, he or she needs to know and have studied these 5 things. The first one being the 6 books of authenticated ahadith. And they are Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Sunan Abu Dawood, Sunan al-Tirmidhi, Sunan al-Nisa'i, and Sunan Ibn Majah. And by studying these 6 books, people will understand the difference between strong hadiths and weak hadiths. Okay, there are some that are authentic and some that are not. And scholars would take the weak hadith and apply them to exceptions to the rule. So for example, the chain of narration might not be as strong, but there were authentic narrators in the chain, so they would keep it as a hadith but classify it as being weak. So think of it like Chinese whispers. The mission of these scholars were to make sure that the original hadith is passed down in its true and original form, and that it didn't get changed towards the end of the chain because people either omitted some details or added spices to it. The second thing scholars need to know is the knowledge of the issues of consensus, ijma' al-ulama, which is knowledge on what all the scholars agreed on, what they differed in, and what they disagreed on. The third point is they should be very well versed in Arabic, so they need to read, write, and speak Arabic in classical form fluently. Because if they don't, and they don't understand grammar, then they won't be able to understand the Quran and the Ahadith properly, because it's all in classical Arabic. So if you do not master the Arabic language, there is no way you can become a scholar. The fourth point is a scholar should know about the 4 schools of thought. The first one being the Hanafi school, based on the teachings of Imam Abu Hanifa. And this is the most popular of the 4 schools when it comes to fiqh. The second one is the Maliki school of thought that was established by Imam Malik ibn Anas, and most of his teachings are followed by people predominantly in North Africa. And then you have the Shafi'i school of thought based on the teachings of Imam Muhammad Idris al-Shafi'i, and he studied with Imam Malik. So this school of thought is predominant in East Africa and Southeast Asia. And finally, you have the Hanbali school of thought that was established by Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, and this is the most conservative school of thought, and it's very strict. And the majority of people who follow this school of thought are in South Asia and the Arabian Gulf. So Islamic colleges and universities in Saudi followed the Hanbali school of thought when they taught fiqh. So these 4 schools of thought are called madhabs, madahib, and they provide guides on how to live as Muslims every day. So they teach you how to pray, they teach you how to get married, they teach you how to do ghusl, they teach you how to go for Hajj and Umrah. So everything that you need to know are in these 4 schools of thought, and people find it easier to marry people who follow the same school of thought because there will be some differences here and there in accordance to the culture the Imam belonged to at the time. And the last point, the 5th point, is that someone who wants to be a scholar needs to know what they are permitted to give as a ruling in fiqh and what they're not permitted to give as a ruling. So Shaykh al-Uthaymeen rahimahullah said that, for example, when it came to matters of bid'ah, which means innovations, such as Muslims celebrating birthdays, for example, which isn't something that was in Muslim culture before, a scholar would not be able to permit people to do certain things that were considered to be a bid'ah by the prominent scholars. So people who wanted to be scholars or who were scholars were held to an oath that they would only provide people with authentic knowledge that had evidence to back it up with from the Quran and Sunnah. However, despite this rule that you cannot oppose the prominent scholars in the things that they all agreed on, you will see now, especially in the Arabian Gulf, especially in Saudi, many scholars are staying silent on problematic things that are happening in the kingdom, such as Halloween parties in Riyadh. That never used to happen before because the scholars would come together and stop this from happening. They didn't want satanic or pagan rituals coming into the kingdom and becoming a part of Saudi culture. However, these days, political powers have more influence and the scholars have been silenced. So this goes to show that it takes someone who has an incredible amount of bravery and fear of Allah and a love for Allah to step into the role of being a scholar. It's not for everybody. Only a minority of people can do this, because only a minority of people will be willing to give up their lives and be martyred for the sake of Allah for standing up for the truth. And holding on to the rope of Allah and the laws of Allah and ensuring that these laws come above the laws of human beings. And not many people can do that. So when you become a scholar and you're a coward, then what's going to happen is people will start to lose respect for the scholars who keep telling them about halal and haram, when at the same time they are issuing problematic fatwas to suit political agendas, and they are not standing up for the oppressed. People are starting to leave Islam and leave the teachings of the prominent scholars because they are seeing contradictions. If you look into the lives of the true prominent scholars, you'll see that many of them got tortured because of their teachings of Islam. There were rulers and leaders who wanted them to stop, and they continued. They were jailed, they were beaten, some of them were martyred. And it's because they held their positions with honour. The Prophet ﷺ said, the scholars are the trustees over Allah's creation. So they have to fulfill that responsibility. Right? It wasn't something for the weak. And the same applies to muftis as well. The mufti is the one who issues fatwas. So for example, you might go to a mufti and you say to him, this is my case, I don't know what to do, can you give me an Islamic ruling on what I need to do? And he will issue that. So mufti has to study all 5 points that I mentioned earlier for the scholars as well. But they have a greater emphasis that's placed on the studies of the 4 schools of thought and the matters of fiqh. Because you can't afford to be giving people the wrong fatwas. You're going to be bearing the responsibility of every wrong fatwa you issue people. And I'm seeing muftis today, they don't even speak Arabic. They don't know how to speak Arabic. They can't string a sentence together in Arabic. They haven't studied more than one school of thought. They've only stuck to Hanbali or they've stuck to Hanafi, which is fine if they live in a community where people follow the teachings of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, but they need to know about the other schools of thought as well, so that they can give a balanced approach when it comes to the matters of fiqh. The matters of fiqh are highly delicate. So if they don't find a solution in the Hanbali school of thought, they can turn to the Shafi'i school of thought or the Hanafi school of thought and find an answer there and base a fatwa on authenticated knowledge. However, what I've noticed a lot of people do is that they don't bother doing that and they'll make up their own fatwa to suit someone, especially if that person has an agenda or there's something of benefit to the mufti. Especially when it comes to financial matters. There are lots of people making up fatwas to enable the corruption and the sins of someone else, especially if there's something in it for them. And boy, would I love to add a 0.6 to that list for a scholar to have knowledge in psychology, because this really helps them to understand the Quran more and the people around them. Okay, it's very important for scholars these days to have that background in psychology, because you won't understand the emotional and spiritual abuse people go through when you have no idea about narcissism and manipulations and gaslighting and the tricks of the qareen through the psyche. So if scholars and muftis don't understand these things, a lot of people are going to suffer, especially the innocent victims of abusers and criminals. And this is the reason why there are no scholars talking about this today, or it's the minority of scholars who are only just waking up to narcissism. But you don't find people actually discussing this because it's still considered to be a taboo subject. No scholar until now has challenged me on my book because it's knowledge they don't understand, so they don't know how to approach any of it. And my work will also open a huge can of worms they want to keep closed. And until this changes, we will continue to see so much narcissism in our communities, because the people who are being put on a pedestal are not talking about it. They're not diving deep into this core issue that's found in every home and every community. It's being brushed under the carpet because they want to be loved by people. They don't want to rock the boat and get cancelled because they're speaking about things that make people feel uncomfortable or that trigger people. They don't want to lose followers. They don't want to lose money and projects and tours. So they stay silent on very important subjects. And this is again the mission of Iblis. Iblis is winning here because no one prominent is actually holding all of these covert narcissists who get exposed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as being wolves in sheep's clothing accountable. Look at the recent events of what's happened with various imams and preachers who got exposed for committing zina with women behind closed doors, child abuse, and so on. Where are the prominent figures? Why are they not speaking out about this? Why is there dead silence amongst the men? Why? Well, they're either terrified that if they speak out about it, their major sins will be exposed in public too. So they're afraid that what goes around comes around and it will hit them as well, because they will be exposed as hypocrites themselves. They're thinking, well, if I speak about him, then my sins are going to be uncovered as well as a punishment. No, I'm going to stay silent. There's that. And there's also cowardice and people who are afraid to lose their following and lose their appeal and lose their position because they know they will get enemies for speaking out. And they simply don't want to deal with that. And the more empathic scholars will be worried that if they speak about all of these crimes that these Quran teachers are committing, these preachers, these dawah bros, these scholars, whoever it is, these professors in universities, if they speak about them, they worry that people will lose hope in Islam and being Muslims, which is understandable, but it's still not a solution to run away from the problem. It has to be addressed because the situation is getting worse. Every year, in the religious field, more and more people are being exposed as wolves in sheep's clothing, and this is causing a crisis in our families and our communities and in the ummah. So just to summarize, the people at the top in the religious field are the scholars, and then you have the muftis, and then you have the students of the scholars. Okay, so they don't become scholars when they graduate from their programs, they become da'iyah. So these are people who learn from the scholars and they pass that knowledge on to other people. So someone can become an ustadh or ustadha, which means teacher. And they are important because they are the ones who pass on Islamic knowledge throughout the generations. But the scholars who people learn from are the researchers. And like I said before, it's important for everyone to know that there is a difference between believers and hypocrites in this field of work. So you'll get people who teach Islam out of a true love for it, and people who teach Islam with an agenda because they want to look a certain way or because they want to attain a certain position. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about these people in Surah Al-Munafiqun, which is Surah number 63. And I've recorded a podcast about this already. It's number 33, where I dive deep into the understanding of Surah Al-Munafiqun, because in this surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the Muslim narcissist. And this is why it's important to talk about this identity, because Allah has dedicated a whole chapter to the Muslim narcissist, who is indeed a hypocrite. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Munafiqun from the first verse, إِذْ جَاءَكَ الْمُنَافِقُونَ قَالُوا نَشْهَدُ إِنَّكَ لَرَسُولُ اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ إِنَّكَ لَرَسُولُهُ وَاللَّهُ يَشْهَدُ إِنَّ الْمُنَافِقِينَ لَكَاذِبُونَ اتخذوا أيمانهم جنة فصدوا عن سبيل الله إنهم ساء ما كانوا يعملون. When the hypocrites come to you, O Prophet, they say, we bear witness that you are certainly the messenger of Allah, and surely Allah knows that you are his messenger, but Allah bears witness that the hypocrites are truly liars. They have made their false oaths as a shield, hindering others from the way of Allah. Evil indeed is what they do. So they pretend to be religious, but what they're teaching and what they're doing is actually pushing people out of Islam. They are corrupting the minds of the youth, and they are causing so many people to suffer because of the understanding of Islam that's being taught. Okay, so these are people who aren't true believers. Allah then says in verse 3, ذلك بأنهم آمنوا ثم كفروا فطبع على قلوبهم فهم لا يفقهون. This is because they believed and then abandoned faith. Therefore their hearts have been sealed, so they do not comprehend. So when you abandon faith, essentially what you do is you follow the way of Iblis. And you choose the dark path in life because that's where all the temptations are, that's where all the sins are and the enjoyment is. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in verse 4, وَإِذَا رَأَيْتَهُمْ تُعْجِبُكَ أَجْسَامُهُمْ وَإِنْ يَقُولُوا تَسْمَعْ لِقَوْلِهِمْ كأنهم خشب مسندة يحسبون كل صيحة عليهم هم العدو فاحذرهم قاتلهم الله أنى يؤفكون. When you see them, their appearance impresses you, right? They look religious, they're good looking and all of that. And when they speak, you listen to their impressive speech. But they are just like worthless planks of wood leaned against a wall. They think every cry is against them, so they always play the victim when they get caught out. They are the enemy, so beware of them, because they're wolves in sheep's clothing. May Allah condemn them. How can they be so deluded from the truth? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is questioning them here because they are pretending to be pious and religious. Well, if you know how to be pious and how to be religious, then how can you be so delusional and not know the truth? Right? These people are very delusional. I teach this all the time. Narcissists are the most delusional people you will ever meet. And this chapter is about the Muslim narcissist because they appear as believers, but in their hearts they have a different agenda. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiallahu anhu reported that the Prophet ﷺ said, يخرج ناس من قبل المشرق ويقرؤون القرآن لا يجاوز تراقيهم يمرقون من الدين كما يمرق السهم من الرمية ثم لا يعودون فيه حتى يعود السهم إلى فوقه. There will come a people from the east who recite the Quran, but it does not go beyond their throats. They will leave religion just as an arrow pierces through its target, and they will not return to it, just as the arrow does not return to the bow. So all of these preachers and imams and sheikhs who, they talk about the Quran and they teach the Quran and they teach the meaning of the Quran and the hadith, but their behavior is something else. Right behind closed doors, they're doing everything that goes against the teachings of the Quran and against the teachings of hadith. This hadith applies to them. Okay, they are people who just regurgitate. They just teach without thinking. They teach without the information actually going into their hearts. It's something that they do for work. It's their career. So he or she will be a Quran teacher, and shortly after, a scandal will come out about them, abusing children, creating sexually explicit videos of them, and engaging in zina with women or engaging in zina with men, or being a part of a paedophile ring, or being involved in drugs and trafficking and money laundering and fraud and charity work. Right? There's a lot of that coming out now too. All these Muslims who are creating charities, but the money is going into their pockets and not to the people in need. There's a lot of that. So people get disappointed and shocked when something like this, news like this, comes out about someone who teaches the Quran. In these cases, the Quran has not traveled to their heart because they don't actually believe in what they're saying. Okay, they're just getting loads of attention online for being this trendy, fun, modern, good-looking Quran teacher or imam, but in reality, they don't actually believe in what they're teaching. And when someone in the religious field is given the responsibility of teaching children, then the trust that is given that person is 10 times more. Okay, because you are putting your children as an amana, in the safety of this person who claims to be pious or who shows himself to be pious and God-fearing. Okay, so these are innocent children. They don't really know what child abuse is at that point. They have no idea. So you're taking a huge risk when you are putting them in the care of someone you don't know. I mean, why does the Prophet ﷺ say, marry the one who has deen? Why? It's because the Prophet ﷺ wants you to teach your children Quran and Hadith and how to be a wonderful Muslim believer. It's your responsibility as a parent. So, believing women need to marry men who are providers and who can take care of a family so that they have the opportunity to stay at home with their children and pass on their knowledge to them. This is so much better and safer in this modern day and age that we're living in than sending your children to a Quran teacher who could do all sorts to your children. I'm not saying all of them are like this, obviously, but it's a risk now that you take because you just don't know what kind of mindset people have anymore. You don't know what they're struggling with when it comes to their sins. So if you can teach your children at home, it's better. And now what these people have done is cause a crisis for many parents who work. They're now thinking, well, how do we teach our children Islam if the father works, the mother works, and the only place they can send their children to learn about the Quran is the local mosque with the local imam? So people have started to take their children out of mosques and Quran classes because people have become paranoid now. With all these stories emerging about imams and Quran teachers and preachers sexually abusing children and doing all sorts, people are becoming paranoid. And who's suffering? It's the children. They're now being deprived of an Islamic education. So this is another mission of Iblis that's being accomplished. I heard a story the other day about an imam who would drug the children who come to him to learn about the Quran, and he would do all sorts to them. He would rape them, sexually abuse them, and then they'd go back home. And they would have no idea what happened to them. And he got exposed because 3 of the girls he sexually abused got pregnant. And all 3 of them were 10 years old. So the mothers of these 3 girls got together to figure out how did this happen at the same time. And long story short, they found out that it was the imam. And it caused a massive uproar. I don't know what happened to that imam in the end, but he deserved capital punishment for that. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu reported that the Prophet ﷺ said, من علامات المنافق ثلاثة وإن صام وصلى وزعم أنه مسلم إذا حدث كذب وإذا وعد أخلف وإذا اؤتمن خان. Among the signs of a hypocrite are 3. Even if he fasts and prays and claims to be a believing Muslim. When he speaks, he lies. When he gives a promise, he breaks it. And when he is trusted, he betrays the trust. So as you can see, when people are in positions of religious authority and they break the trust of people, they automatically become known as hypocrites. Okay? And these people are slaves to their inner demons, their qareens. And not only have they betrayed this trust with people, they have betrayed the trust that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them by allowing them to be in this position. And being a Quran teacher or an imam or a preacher is a position of honor. It's a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you violate that gift, if you destroy that gift with your evil doing, then believe me, Allah will expose and humiliate you in public to get you out of the religious field of work. People need to know who these people are. When Allah exposes someone and humiliates someone, it's for everyone to see that just because this guy has a long beard, just because he says قال Allah, قال Rasul, just because he has a short thobe, just because he's Salafi, he's Sufi, he's this, he's that, doesn't mean jack if he doesn't have that belief in his heart. So Allah will expose people as child abusers, rapists, porn addicts and whatnot, because he needs to cleanse the religious field, right? Iblis has already fulfilled his first mission, which is creating paranoia now in the community because of these people. Now people are worried. Who do we trust? Who do we go to for Islamic guidance? Who do we send our children to? We're confused. These people have confused us. If this is someone who prays 5 times a day and he claims to pray tahajjud and he's gone to Umrah 10 times and he's done Hajj and he's done this and he's done that, then who are we? If he's got all this knowledge and is unable to restrain his desires and is unable to live by what he's preaching, then how on earth are we going to do it? And we're not people of knowledge. And we're not people of this status. We're not scholars. We're not preachers. So if these people can't do it and they fail miserably and they're committing every filthy sin under the sun behind closed doors, but they're telling us to stop drinking and stop having girlfriends and boyfriends and stop going to clubs and stop smoking and stop this and stop that, but they're not doing it themselves, they're not stopping things themselves, then the second mission of Iblis will be accomplished when people give up. A man might say, well, I might as well unblock Stacey because I only blocked her because this sheikh told me to, and he told me it's a haram relationship that I could go to hell for. But yeah, he's had 6 haram relationships in the past year. So there's no hope. I might as well go speak to her. So you can see how Iblis corrupts people through those they put on a pedestal. So Iblis will attack them through their qareen and cause them to sin. Okay, it's not the fault of the qareen. They have chosen to listen to their qareen. But by doing so, they could be the cause of the potential downfall of a nation because of how much people look up to them as role models. People can lose their iman. People can lose hope because these preachers who are always teaching us about Islam can't follow what they're teaching. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exposes someone, like I said before, He doesn't do it to those who fall into sin unintentionally. Allah will give people a few chances before they get exposed. I mean, if they're lucky, they'll get a few. But let's say a preacher is messing around with women, okay? Let's say there are desperate women in his DMs and they're complimenting him and validating him and they're all begging to be his second wife or third wife or whatever. He's getting so much attention and he falls into temptation with them. Let's say that happens once, twice, 3 times, and then he's now thinking, well, I can get away with this. And his arrogance increases, his fear of Allah decreases, and he starts looking into different things. Okay, because he's got a porn addiction already, he's looking into homosexual content, paedophilic content, and he takes it to the next level and involves a child. Here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will expose him because he's taken it too far. When it comes to children, people will always get exposed because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala needs to create an awareness of what child abusers look like. Just because he's got a beard, just because he's got a thob, just because he says La ilaha illallah, qala Allah, qala Rasul, doesn't mean that your children are safe being around them. So Allah does it to create an awareness and to teach this person a lesson because of their arrogance. It's meant to humble them so they repent and turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's meant to stop them. Some people don't stop after that, they continue. But what I'm saying is that Allah will expose people when the level of arrogance increases and they turn to a worse sin. And once someone gets involved in, child pornography and the sexual abuse of children, there is no coming back from that. The person's reputation will be completely and utterly destroyed. And it can make some people suicidal. And that's again what Iblis wants. He wants people to reach that stage. So think about it, right? It's ego and pride that makes these narcissists so delusional to their sins. I mean, do they think they could do all of this and create videos and take pictures and send pictures to other people that are so inappropriate or of a sexual nature and speak to, different women and never think they're going to get caught? But this is the level of delusion that they're in. They are so blinded by their arrogance that they never think one day these women will expose them. And they never think that the photographs and videos they have on their laptops or that they send to other people of a sexual nature will be presented as evidence in court against them and they will be publicly humiliated for them. But this is the level of stupidity that they're in. And they have been tricked and scammed by their own qareen, because they've been used as a puppet to not only ruin other people, but ruin themselves too. And these people have also been a cause for many Muslims to turn to non-Muslims for knowledge, or liberal Muslims, because they are sick and tired of being let down by Muslims who just can't practice what they preach. They're sick of the hypocrisy, so they prefer to listen to Christians and other non-Muslims because they make more sense and they hold themselves to a higher moral standards than Muslims who believe they can get away with so many sins and hypocrisy because of their position in society, and because they believe no one would ever think that someone like me could do something like that. So of course there will be empathic preachers out there who are great, in public and in private, but they are now the minority. The majority of people will have an agenda by being in the religious field of work. And like I told you before, Iblis places them there because Iblis knows that if the knowledge is corrupted, the people will be corrupted. So when Allah exposes people, it's to open the eyes of the vulnerable, especially single women and mothers. So one of the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to bring our attention to is when you have a sheikh or a preacher or an imam and he's acting inappropriately with a woman, and it's clear that he shouldn't really be doing this. Why is he calling you at 3 o'clock in the morning? Why is he FaceTiming you? Why is he sending you flirty messages? Why is he locking the door when you speak to him? Why is he doing strange things and acting in a strange way when you're around him and putting his hand on your shoulder or on your back? Do alarm bells not go off when this happens? And I'm addressing the women who get involved with all of these people in religious authority and then cry wolf. So you can't get involved with someone and you know they're doing something inappropriate because of their position, and because you didn't get what you wanted out of the situation from this imam. For example, he didn't divorce his wife to marry you, or he didn't fulfill a promise, or he didn't give you money, then you go and expose him in public. The women who do this will be punished as well by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because they're engaging in the sin with these people in power or in authority, and they're taking advantage of their status in society, and when they don't get what they want, they go and expose them. And it's the victim sometimes who blackmails the predator, and it causes big problems. And this is how a lot of sins and crimes get covered up, because of the blackmailing that happens. So either the criminal blackmails the victim, or the victim blackmails the criminal because they threaten to expose them, and they know that their reputation is on the line if they do. So I wonder sometimes, why do women allow these things to happen with men who are in these positions? So it's the naivety of women that gets them into a lot of trouble as well sometimes. They don't use their brains. A lot of women do not use their brains when they're in these kinds of situations. And you'll get the narcissistic women as well, who target imams, preachers and sheikhs because their satanic mission is to bring him down. They are the ones who are going to corrupt this preacher and cause iman issues in all of his followers. So she's one of the soldiers of Iblis sent to a preacher. So you might get some preachers who actually start out with good intentions, right? They're fine, they're teaching about the Quran and Hadith and the Prophet and the Sahaba and all of that, and they're doing okay. And then they get tested with narcissistic women in their DMs who look like Barbie dolls, and they're flirting and this and that, and they are soldiers of Iblis sent to take you down, because the knowledge has to be corrupted and the hope of people has to be lost. And unfortunately, because so many young men in particular are not equipped spiritually to handle these tests, they fall into these problems with women, they get exposed, and a lot of their hard work goes to waste. So instead of it becoming a reward for them, it now becomes a punishment, because they cannot restrain their desires. The dawah field is not for the weak. You've got to be equipped spiritually to handle all the tests that will come your way. You think that when you DM women, that one of them isn't going to expose you for your ridiculous offers? We've seen that a few times this year, but dawah bros will only message women they don't respect in a disrespectful manner. So if they are offering someone to be a secret second wife or a temporary wife, and all of that is because they don't respect you. So women have to look at the ways in which they present themselves to the world and ask themselves, why would a man come to me with that offer? Women have to protect themselves as well. We can't, complain about all these men who DM women and then continue with the posts online that scream for attention. Right? You're screaming for compliments and validation, and of course you're going to get predatory men who are going to prey on your insecurities and try their luck. Believe me, men do not respect women when they give them offers like these or they start inappropriate conversations with them. I launched my book in 2021 and wallahi until now I've never received a message like that from anybody. It's you who has to place the right boundaries. Right? You have to give off the energy that shows people you respect yourself. And then you won't cause a fitna for yourself. Because when you respect yourself in the way you present yourself, even narcissistic people will have respect for you. And women who are in the religious field really should protect themselves even more from fitna, the same way Aisha radiallahu anha did. It's best to teach men behind a screen. Especially if you have pages that are open and public for men and women to see, you're going to corrupt your teachings if you keep promoting yourself as a person. So your pages become more about you than what you teach. And this is a clear sign of someone who isn't that sincere in what they do, especially when it comes to Islam. Because we don't need to see pictures of you every 5 minutes in between all your posts. People want your Islamic knowledge. And fame will get to your head eventually when you keep promoting yourself because of all the attention and compliments and validation you're getting on your looks and on your shoes and your clothes and your house. And you start to, slip into showing your personal life, and then you start sharing your relationship, and then you start sharing your family. And, you do it to please the people because you're seeing that it's getting you more followers. It's getting you more attention. And this is the slippery slope you go down when you start to, overly exaggerate in self-promotion. It will cause you to deviate and become very arrogant. And then you become delusional, you'll fall into sins, and then the ending won't be good. I get so many people asking me, why don't you come out in video? Why don't we see your pictures? Why don't we see you, speaking in your podcast? I don't want to. I don't want to at all. Because I'm protecting myself before I'm protecting other people from unnecessary fitna. And being behind a screen helps me to help men as well, who really need this knowledge and who really need the coaching and everything else that my work offers. So you've got to be very careful when you volunteer yourself in the religious field, because I promise you'll be on the front line in that battlefield with Iblis. And he will target those who people like to listen to and gain Islamic knowledge from. So if you're in dawah, if you're a lecturer in university in Islamic studies, if you are a preacher, a scholar, a sheikh, a mufti, you're going to be on the front line. And the ones who get shot the earliest are those who promote themselves so much because they already have a big ego. So it's easy for shaitan to get to those people first. So if you have low iman, you're going to get targeted. And if you can't control your qareen, you're going to get targeted. And if you make a business out of dawah, you're going to get targeted. So people who become famous in the dawah world, they start, doing paid collaborations, paid partnerships. They start selling loads of courses that are really expensive. And they get paid to do loads of ads for people and companies. So it's a huge money-making scheme for them too. those people are quickly targeted by Iblis. And because of the money-making schemes behind dawah, there's a lot of competition in dawah. So you'll notice that some preachers are in high competition with each other, and they will tear each other down because they want to be the best and they want to be, the most impressive. And they compete in knowledge and status and followers. And, I built this organization and I've made millions from it. And do you know what I mean? I've started this charity foundation. They compete with each other when it's never been like that before. You never found the prominent scholars competing with each other. They always worked with each other. They always shared knowledge, and they encouraged people to seek knowledge from other imams and scholars and muftis. There's never a sense of competition in dawah, but there is now because of the finances involved and the fame that's involved. And you'll notice as well, when you see tours of scholars and preachers, you'll notice the empath ones stick together and the narcissistic ones stick together. They don't mix, because the narcissistic ones are threatened by the empaths, and the empaths don't enjoy the company of the narcissistic preachers. Ibrahim ibn Adham, who was a prominent scholar in Sunni Sufism and was an 8th century ruler in Afghanistan, said, ليس شيء أشد على إبليس من العالم الحليم إن تكلم بعلم وإن سكت بحلم. It is said that nothing and no one is harder upon Iblis than a forbearing scholar. If he speaks with authentic knowledge, and if he is silent with forbearance. Forbearance here means with wisdom. He's calm, he is intelligent, and he's got emotional intelligence as well, because he understands the game of Iblis. And the scholar who has authentic knowledge and is aware of Iblis and tames his qareen is the hardest for Iblis to crack. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said that these are the scholars who will have the highest positions in Jannah, because they've taken their roles very seriously and with a deep love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are warriors within themselves. So you can see just from this how it is only the minority of people who really are the true scholars. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu reported that the Prophet ﷺ said, إن المؤمن ليمضي شياطينه يعني على الطاعات كما يمضي أحدكم بعيره في السفر. Verily, the believer will wear down his inner demons by obedience to Allah, just as one of you wears down his camel on a journey. So, the Prophet ﷺ expresses a lot of importance on sustaining power over your inner demons, because it's the only way you will succeed, especially if you are in the religious field. If you can't do it, your days are numbered. You will get exposed in one way or another, or you will get destroyed by your own qareens, or the qareens of those who have been sent to destroy you. And they can only destroy you because you have weak iman, or you're not a believer, or the Quran only reaches your throat. So if you're suffering from low iman and addictions and other major sins that you can't stop, then I suggest you don't get involved in the religious field of work, because all eyes are going to be on you. And there will be lots of people who will revel in your downfall, because it will be a mission accomplished for Iblis. So all his soldiers will be rejoicing when a dawah bro or a dawah sister or a preacher or an imam or whoever experiences a downfall because they've been exposed for major sins. So be very careful with what you sign up for. And women in particular really need to keep their eyes open. Okay, there will be women out there who will love the attention of famous people in dawah, because these people are seen as trophies for them. So they will get excited when someone, shows them some attention, and especially if they're codependent, they will really cling on to that and obsess over this person, and they will want to marry this person. So any attention, any breadcrumbs someone famous online, like a TikTok preacher, or, if they give these women attention, then, it can really reel them into a lot of problems as well, because they're like, well, if I'm married to this preacher, then I'll be a somebody as well. And, I must be special because he chose me. So it feels good for a lot of women. But these women get themselves dragged into so many problems. They get used and abused and discarded. So don't be happy when these people are messaging you. They know the right thing to do. If they're interested in you, they will ask to do things the Islamic way and the respectful way. If you're receiving inappropriate DMs, then that's a red flag right there for you. And if you choose to pursue that, then you've got a lesson to learn. It's as simple as that. And on the other hand, and unfortunately, there are some women who fall victim to these types of men, and there's nothing they can do about it. And I'll give you 3 examples. The first is a story of a woman who went to a judge for a khula. And she was so desperate for this khula, it was taking more than 2 years for her to get divorced from her very, very abusive husband. And the judge wasn't making it easy. He's one of those, staunch narcissistic Salafi ones. And he kept sending her back home. And then one day she begged him. She actually went to the court and got on her knees and begged him to divorce her from her husband. And he said, on one condition, that you sleep with me. And she said, well, I fear Allah, I can't do something like that. I'll meet you halfway and I will enter a temporary marriage with you and do it that way. So she got married with no paperwork, no nothing. He got what he wanted from her and then he issued her a khula. So there are judges who take advantage of desperate women. So this is the importance of having male relatives with you when you go to a mufti or a judge. Okay, it's really important you don't go alone, because there are people who don't fear Allah who will take advantage of your desperate situation. Okay, especially when they see you begging and pleading for help. The second story is of a woman who went to a raqi. Someone told her that she has black magic and she needs to go to a ruqya practitioner to get help. So she went to him and she said that the sheikh, it was just her and the sheikh, he said, I can't have anyone else in the room. She was with her son, who was quite young. So he asked her son to sit outside while he did the work on her. And he told her that she has a ashiq jinn, and in order for him to get rid of the ashiq jinn, he needs to put his hand on her private parts. So he was sexually abusing her, but she had no idea that this was not appropriate. She thought, he was doing what he's meant to do. And I'm telling you, there are so many ruqya practitioners like this. They really take advantage of vulnerable and desperate people, and they touch people inappropriately. They might even do sihr on some people because they're actually magicians. I'll do another podcast about that another day, inshallah. But a lot of women and children get sexually abused when they go to ruqya practitioners. And again, you never should go without a male present with you. And the third story is of a woman who belongs to the Sufi community, and the Sufi sheikh groomed her. So she spent a long time alone with this sheikh because she's a new Muslim and he's teaching her about Islam. He's teaching her about so many things and he's starting to become inappropriate. He likes her. He started to groom her. And she was engaged to someone at the time, and he made her leave her fiancé and sleep with him because he said to her that as a Sufi sheikh, he's the middleman between her and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that there are certain things that are allowed for them that are forbidden for other people. So zina is allowed for him because he's a Sufi sheikh, but it's not allowed for others. He took advantage of her naivety because she was a new Muslim. She had no idea what she was doing, and she got involved with the sheikh sexually. And she had no idea that she was being taken advantage of. She thought she was being blessed by sleeping with the Sufi sheikh. She thought she was going to get some amazing, spiritual powers from being with him. And this is, again, another thing that new Muslims have to be aware of. They will be taken advantage of by these preachers and sheikhs and whoever because they assume that they don't have enough knowledge about certain things. And you've got to be very careful being alone with these people because some of them can drug you. So never, ever, ever be alone with someone in authority. And don't be alone with the opposite sex in general, right? But in particular, stay away from closed environments with these people and be very alert and aware. When some of them start acting up in a very inappropriate manner, it means the qareen has taken over in that moment in time and he wants to corrupt you and corrupt him. And women can do this as well, by the way. You can get some women who are preachers and they seduce other people. They seduce their colleagues. They seduce other sheikhs. There are inappropriate messages between them and other preachers. So not everything is as it seems, but when you're in the religious field, you have to protect yourself even more than the average person. And like I said before, lots of people who are like this don't get called out because people are afraid of their own reputation if they're linked to them. Or they're afraid of a divorce or a family breaking apart. If their family member was to be exposed, their entire reputation as a family would be ruined. And they are afraid also of the backlash and the revenge the narcissist will take on them if they were to expose them. So they worry about the danger that could come to them as a result of speaking out and standing up for justice, especially if vulnerable women are involved or children. I mean, look at the P. Diddy case right now. Everyone who is linked to him is now terrified that they will be exposed for all their sins because they're all in the same swamp. They're all running away, they're all disappearing. Celebrities are acting strangely because they are terrified that investigations will show that they are also involved in child abuse and satanic things. So they're all worried, they're all freaking out because P. Diddy got exposed. So now they're all worried about themselves. So there are loads of reasons why people don't get called out. But if you see red flags in people, it's important for you to take a step back and change who you take your knowledge from. And sometimes narcissists can give you good knowledge as well. So I would advise you to take the good and leave the bad. But it's always better to follow the calm and wise people who are empaths in the dawah field and the educational field in general. And it's obvious who they are. I can't listen to screaming sheikhs or screaming preachers because the maturity, intelligence and wisdom is taken out of their teachings when they behave in such a way. There's a good way of communicating with people and getting a message across to them without having to scream and shout and give everyone a headache. So always look at someone's character before you look at their knowledge. And don't follow anyone blindly. Okay, if you're in doubt about something or you want to verify information, use your brains and go and read and research things yourself. Don't rely on people for your Islamic knowledge. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave everyone a brain, so do the research. And there are plenty of books out there that can teach you everything you need to know. Go to any Islamic bookshop and you'll find so many wonderful books about fiqh and about the prophets and the Sahaba and tafsir Ibn Kathir of the Quran and so on and so forth. There's so much out there that you can educate yourself with. If you're unsure about, your rights as a wife in Islam, just go and buy a book about it. And don't take Islamic advice from people who aren't qualified to give you that advice. And don't take fatwas from people who aren't allowed to give you fatwas. And don't take life advice and relationship advice from preachers and dawah bros and dawah sisters and imams and all of them who do not give you a beautiful and easy understanding of Islam. So if they are red pill, avoid them. And if they're very liberal, avoid them. And if they're teaching you about a hadith but they dance in their TikTok videos and they are trying to make themselves as appealing as possible and gain all that fame and attraction and validation, avoid them like the plague. Please avoid them. These are people who are not giving you the correct understanding of what it means to be a Muslim. And they are misguided people. Okay, don't let them misguide you as well. And don't rely on other people to teach your children about the Quran and about the Prophet ﷺ. Don't send them to strangers and people whom you're not very familiar with. And if you're single and you are someone who loves Islam, you're passionate about reading, you love seeking knowledge, then you have to make sure that you marry a like-minded man who can take care of you properly so you can stay at home and raise your children properly. They don't have to be sent to a mosque. They don't have to go anywhere without you or their father, so that they're protected from vultures and predators out there. Okay, the only time they should be going to the mosque is with their father to pray or with you to pray. Don't send your kids alone unless you are 100% sure of the person who is teaching them. But aside from that, I really don't advise that you do that. And perhaps find, ways online where children can learn about the Quran and Islam without having to go in person and be subjected to any kind of abuse or bullying. Because if they are traumatized by imams and preachers and Quran teachers, then it is very likely they will hate Islam growing up. And this is why it's more important to make sure that the people who teach them Islam are good people. So they do not connect Islam with narcissistic behavior and satanic individuals. And this is what many people have done from their childhood because they got abused by such people. Narcissists and codependents alike. So do your best to protect them from those childhood traumas. And finally, I'll repeat it again, please don't put people on a pedestal lest you be disappointed by their actions in the future. Because everyone is susceptible to the attacks of Iblis. So don't rely on people being your constant role models when Islam has given us role models in the prophets already. And we can find many role models, among the Sahaba and Sahabiyat. So read their stories and be inspired by those who are already promised Jannah. Okay? Don't hold on to those in this dunya who have no idea if they're going to Jannah or not. The smartest thing to do is to always look up to those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised Jannah to. Read about their characters, read about their life story, dive into their biographies, and you'll be safe from falling into a trap where you could potentially lose all hope and all your faith. So may Allah protect us all, inshallah, from the attacks of Iblis, and may He make us steadfast in our deen. I hope that you've enjoyed this podcast today and that you found it enlightening and beneficial. Please do like the podcast if you found it helpful, and do share it with others if you feel they could benefit from it, and do subscribe to the channel if you would like to be notified when I drop a new podcast. Please remember me in your dua, and until the next podcast, inshallah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.